And with us today is Charles Wright, who is an active club member. And Charles talked to us about there's a real effort by some to not allow nonviolent felons to ever vote again once they get out of jail. So Charles is here today along with Desmond Meade, who's state director of an effort for that. So if the two of you would come up and talk to the club about that, and a petition drive that is in place to address that issue. So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Charles Wright, good member of our club.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your generous applause. I guess I'm intimidated standing up here looking at all of this blue. I keep hearing that we live in the bubble, but apparently that bubble must be blown by Democrats because you are the greatest. Let me just say this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all persons are created equally, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, our presenter today truly believes that if a person has transgressed against society and paid their penalty, they should be given a second chance. Because above all, Desmond believes that America's bedrock and sacred promise must not ever be allowed to be alienated from its people. Therefore, he and we as Democrats must never allow anyone to abuse that bedrock principle of America. This morning, it is my honor, and I do say true honor, to present to you Desmond Meade. He's the executive director of Faith in Florida. I became associated with him because of the Grace AME Church here in the Villages, which I'm a part of, and we started the petition drive here in the Villages, and we became aware of this great gentleman. But not only is he a director of Faith in Florida, he is a member of all of the relevant organizations that help protect the rights of our people. The NAACP, the ACLU, the Florida League of Women Voters, the A. Philip Randolph Institute, PICO Florida, and the Florida Immigration Coalition. Desmond has also been one of those rare people that have had the chance to speak before groups as diverse as the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and spoke in Geneva before the UN. And today, he has the rare and the distinct privilege of being able to speak to the greatest Democratic club in the nation, the Democrats of Lake, Sumter, and Marion County. Desmond Meade.
In 2005, on a hot, humid day in South Florida, I found myself standing in front of railroad tracks, and for a few moments I was able to block out that oppressive heat and humidity, because as I stood there, the only thing that was going through my mind was how much pain I was going to feel when I jumped in front of an oncoming train. That day I stood there a broken man, addicted to drugs and alcohol, homeless, unemployed. The only thing I owned was the clothes that was on my back. Now, my mother raised me in a Christian family, and I know that she didn't raise me to be at that point, but there I was that day. And I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. None of that. I just wanted to end it all. But that train never came, and I crossed those tracks, and I walked a couple more blocks, and I checked myself into a substance abuse treatment facility. And after successfully completing that, I moved into a homeless shelter. And it was while I was living at the homeless shelter, I decided, since my mother loved education, that I was going to go to school, and I enrolled in the local community college there. And I did pretty well in paralegal studies, and I was encouraged to continue my education, and so I pursued a bachelor's public safety management with a concentration in criminal justice. And eventually, one thing led to another. In May of 2014, I graduated from Florida International University College of Law with a law degree. Thank you. I truly do appreciate that applause. But, you know, regretfully, I have to let you know that my story does not have a happy ending, because I am counted amongst almost 2 million Floridians who cannot vote because of a prior felony conviction. Florida is only one of 3 states that permanently disenfranchises its citizens once convicted of a felony. And as a result, not only can I not vote, but I can't even practice in my profession because I can't sit for the bar until my civil rights have been restored. I got married in 2012, and I still cannot buy a home for my wife and kids because a lot of HOAs have provisions written within their bylaws that will prevent me from not only owning, but even renting a home in that subdivision. This is what myself and almost 2 million people have to deal with. So I know I have very limited time, so I'm going to be banging out some facts and figures to you real quick, and hopefully you'll have a couple questions when I'm done. Number one is, and by the way, I don't know how your previous speakers conducted themselves, but I want you to remember me as a person that brings gifts with me when I come to speak. So I do have a couple gifts for a couple lucky members here. In 2010, the last comprehensive study showed that almost over 1.54 million people in Florida couldn't vote. From 2010 to 2014, over 700,000 individuals were convicted of felonies. Now, typically when we think of felonies, we think of some very bad crimes. But the reality is that an overwhelming majority of those individuals were convicted for nonviolent offenses, drug offenses, or property-related crimes. Out of the over 700,000 people that were convicted of felonies, less than 1% was convicted, say, for capital murder. But what happened was this, is that prior to 2010, the 4 years prior to that, an average amount of 48,000 people a year received their rights. When this current administration first came into office the first year, a total of 50 people had their rights restored. And for the last 5 years, an average of 350 people get their rights back each year. Now, the process that they have in place, I can use me as an example. If I were to have completed my sentence today, the current policy requires that I wait either 5 or 7 years. In my case, I would have to wait 7 years till 2022, June of 2022, before I'm allowed to even apply to have my rights restored. After I apply in 2022, I would have to wait an additional 8 to 10 years. So you're looking at June of 2030 or 32 before I can see if I have a hearing. And even then, I still have less than 0.001% of a chance of having my rights restored. And in that 15-year process, if I so much as get a speeding ticket, I'll be disqualified. That's what people are facing today. In the state of Florida, you can get a felony conviction for driving with a suspended license, disturbing turtle nesting eggs, burning a tire in public, catching a lobster. I don't know if any of you guys like to go lobster hunting, but if you catch a lobster and the tail is too short, that's a felony in the state of Florida. And my favorite, and I know many of you at some point or another have gone to either Publix or the florist and gotten those balloons. You know, graduation time just passed. Probably said, congrats, grad, happy birthday, get well soon, happy anniversary. And I know that a great deal of you have probably inadvertently or intentionally released those balloons in the air. In the state of Florida, that's a third-degree felony. And if you were caught and convicted, you would also be just like me and lose your rights for life. And so at Floridian for a Fair Democracy and my parent organization, Faith in Florida, you know, it got to a point where we decided that, you know, first of all, politicians should not have the final say on what American citizens get to vote. And we knew that we had to, and because the process is purely arbitrary, they leave a lot of room for favoritism or biases that would actually disenfranchise an American citizen. I think that whether or not you and I agree on everything should not determine whether or not you or I should have access to the ballot box. So we decided that the only way that we can change the situation was to take that power out of the hands of politicians and put it in the hands of the Constitution. Put it in the Constitution. Let the people decide. And so we have a constitutional amendment that it's very simple, and it basically allows for the restoration of voting rights to individuals who have completed their sentence, with the exception, this policy would not apply to people convicted of murder and people convicted of felony sexual offenses, such as child molestation, such as rape. But once anyone else is released and they complete their probation or parole or whatever, that they will immediately be given the ability to vote, the right to vote, and be a part of this democratic process. Just think for a minute, and I want to take you to a very nice place right now. And you don't have to close your eyes if you don't want to, but just those who do, close your eyes. And just imagine 2 million voters overnight becoming eligible in the state of Florida. Somebody said, oh yeah. What do you think that would do? What else would that do? That would drastically shift the electorate, and the color of your shirts would probably be the color of the state. And when the color of the state is the color of your shirt, it basically ensures that anything getting into the White House love your colors. You know, I often remind people when I speak to other Democratic clubs throughout the state, and I ask them, think about your efforts during the last election to get President Obama reelected. Think about how many doors you knocked on, how many dollars you contributed, how many phone calls you made, how many people you registered. And you did all of that work for 4 more years. Then I asked a very important question. If you did all that for 4 more years, what are you willing to do for 4 decades? What are you willing to do for 4 decades? Every year, Florida blocks out at least 1.7 million people, prevents them from voting. If we're able to pass this constitutional amendment, they're looking at averaging maybe 230,000 people. That's it. And so I get to the questions that is going to give you the prizes. When I told you in 2010 that over 1.54 million people were disenfranchised, I need 2 brave souls or 3 brave souls to tell me what percentage of those individuals were African American. 75, just raise your hand. 82, 95, 92, one more. 100, that's a trick answer there. That's a trick answer. I have to disqualify that one. But let me tell you, so typically when I give a prize, it's not to the person that gets the right answer. It's the person that's most wrong. Because when they get that prize, they will never forget how wrong they were. Out of 1.54 million people who are disfranchised, a little over 500,000 of them were African American citizens that looked more like you than me, that couldn't vote. And so, sir, you got the prize. Now, I have another question. We have almost 2 million people, who cannot vote. Every year, approximately 200,000 people are convicted of felonies in the state of Florida. And I've listed some of the crazy things that you can get a felony conviction for. What percentage of people who are convicted of felonies even spend a day in prison? 35%. 50%. How much? 1%? 75%? 18%. The reality is, over the last 5 years, less than 25% of individuals who are convicted of felonies actually spend a day in prison. Just think about that for a minute. We have almost 2 million people who cannot vote because of a prior felony conviction. Only 101,000 are currently incarcerated, and another 135,000 are under some kind of supervision. So where are those other 1.7 million people? They're in our communities, they're in our families, they're in our congregations, and in some cases, they're even in our pulpits. Now, I don't know how many of you all, and you did get the prize, but I don't know how many of you all right, consider yourself people of faith or Christians or whatever kind of religion that you might claim. But this is what I do know. I consider myself a Christian. And the one thing that I hang my hat on is that story about when Jesus was on the cross, when he was dying for my sins. And there was a criminal that asked him to be saved. Jesus didn't tell him he had to wait 5 or 7 years. No. What he said was, this day ye shall enter into paradise. And I understand that deeply interwoven into the fabric of my faith are the concepts of forgiveness, redemption, and restoration. Because all of us have done wrong at some point. And so when we talk about say yes to second chances, we're really talking about you standing on the bedrock of your faith. Because that's what our faith is all about. That is what this country is all about. When the Pilgrims came over, they came over for what? A second chance. And that's all we ask. Anyway, I want to thank you for this little time. And if there's any questions, I guess.
Where do we sign the petitions?
The petitions are in the back. And not only do we need people to sign the petitions, but we need you to get others to sign the petitions. We have more than enough petitions available. And we have a website as well, FloridiansForFairDemocracy.org. And you're welcome to visit that website too.
Good.